Emily Mason and Ben Burrows were the oddest of odd couples, as mismatched as two best friends could ever be. Emily was still very small even for her delicate age, and yet she had a mind decades beyond most adults. Emily was a genius, an off-the-scale prodigy, and a completely immoral murderess. Emily saw people, most people, as her dollies, to play with and then throw away when they were broken. Ben, on the other hand, was enormous, just over 6 feet tall at the shoulder. His massive size and strength was the result of extensive genetic abnormalities, which carried with them more drawbacks than advantages. Ben was not very smart, to put it kindly, and most people couldn't even understand his attempts at language. Emily understood him, though, clear as a bell. In a world where they were both monsters, freaks of nature, they saw the other's true self. Ever since they had escaped that horrible asylum on the night of the long knives, Ben and Emily had been living from day to day, traveling mostly under cover of darkness and having adventures as they found them. Of course, usually it was Emily dictating where they went and what they did. She was the brains of the outfit. And although she was very kind to her bestie, she knew that Ben shouldn't be the one making decisions. Until one day, that changed. Just for one day. Ben hadn't asked her and probably never would have thought to ask, but when the idea occurred to Emily, she shared it.
Benji, I think you should pick our next adventure. We always do what I want to do. It's only fair you get to pick sometimes.
They walked a few hours more. Well, mostly Ben walked and Emily rode sitting on his shoulders. Suddenly, he stopped. He issued a blurgled bleat of joy and pointed at a sliver of red neon light falling between the tree branches. They emerged on the edge of a vast, empty parking lot, centered around the single most amazing building either one of them had ever seen. Bright lights blazing up into the sky long after business hours, dazzling up and down the sides of a 3-story structure the size of a small stadium. It looked like some kind of Blade Runner circus tent. The colorful billboard out front of the building read, Skatopia. That's with the number 8. Skating, rollerblading, mini golf, go-karts, batting cages, trampoline park, foam pits, ninja obstacle course, laser tag, bowling, arcade, rock climbing, and more. More? More? How could there possibly be more? What else was there to have? Emily and Ben looked at each other with glee.
This looks amazing, Ben. Great choice. What do you mean we don't kill anybody? For real, Benji? For real, for real? No, you're right. I promised we would do it your way. If we end up in a cage again, I'm going to be so mad at you. Okay, fine. I pinky promise that I won't play dollies tonight. I won't kill anyone. Now, let's go have some fun.
Drinking whiskey in the kitchen and telling scary stories around the fire. Music, monsters, and mayhem. Killers, cannibals, and cults. Fearful fiction and furious fact. Tall tales and terrifying truths. This is a scary home companion. They took a quick stroll around the outskirts of the parking lot so that Emily could see Skatopia from every angle. She wanted to gauge their security, and she counted 4 old cameras and very weak locks. Nothing she couldn't handle. Based on the scant number of cars parked outside, it looked like there was maybe an overnight cleaning crew, but no one else. Easy peasy. She took some zip ties from Ben's pocket. They always carried these things. Zip ties came in handy in so many ways. Using them, they could easily subdue a few people without killing them, and then have the rest of the night with this whole magnificent place all to themselves. There were a lot of big murals of stars and comets on the walls outside, and a lot of handmade posters featuring cartoon snakes that all read, "Go Vipers." Ben didn't like those.
Have you been having dreams about that giant snake again? Those are just dreams, Sally. Like the butterfly woman. It's all make-believe, okay? Here we go. This is the place.
They found a set of dumpsters around back of the building, outside an emergency exit near the mini golf course. As luck would have it, a pasty young man laden with ooey-gooey garbage bags was shuffling through the exit and towards the trash bins.
We need to get his keys from him. Normally, I'd slash his femoral and watch him do the bloody dance, but in the spirit of our arrangement, you can knock him out and I'll tie him up, okay?
For being as big as he was, Ben was remarkably light on his feet. The young man was too busy struggling with the rapidly deteriorating bags and didn't notice the giant that was lumbering up behind him. Ben gave the kid a little slap, just a tap right on the side of his head, real gentle, and he collapsed on top of the trash bags. Emily saw right away that he was dead. His neck was bent sideways to an angle that you just don't come back from. Nonetheless, she zip-tied his hands and his feet before taking his keys. There was no reason to hurt Ben's feelings on his big day.
No, he's fine, Ben. Just sleeping, like we wanted. But why don't I knock out the next one, okay?
They entered a long, dark hallway, adorned with day-glow nebula and shooting stars on the walls. In the distance came the throbbing beat of the roller rink, synthesized horns, tinny drum loops, and censored lyrics. Ben wasn't the only one who had never been to a place like this before. In her very short life, Emily had spent few years outside of imprisonment and had never been given the opportunity to run wild in a place like this, a mecca of fun and activities for kids just her age. Emily wanted to do everything she saw on the billboard and more. Near the end of the hallway, she saw an older man talking with a young woman. They both wore matching green polo shirts with the Skatopia logo on the back. The woman went back out towards the main concourse, while the man stepped into an office. Emily looped one of her zip ties and entered the office behind him. She had a system for this, and she'd practiced it a lot. It worked very well. Being of such diminutive stature, Emily needed a way to level the playing field when dealing with adults or anyone that was bigger than her, which, let's face it, was pretty much everyone. She didn't want Ben to fight all of her battles. So, when she could reach, and in this case she could very easily because the Skatopia manager was quite short, she would just loop a zip tie around a person's neck and cinch it tight. That's all it took. No one could get their fingers underneath it, and within seconds, the blood flow to their brain was cut off, rendering them unconscious. At which point, she would zip tie their hands and feet and cut loose the one around their neck before they died. Usually. And so it went with the manager. Within 60 seconds of entering his office, he found himself bound and gagged and coming to on his own floor. Emily sat in front of him, crisscross applesauce.
Hi, Mr. Manager. I see your name is Eugene. I don't like that name. I'm going to call you Mr. Manager. My bestie and I want to play here tonight. I wanted to kill you. You should be dead right now. But Benji, he's a good boy. He just wants to play. So you're going to lay here, right here, and not wiggle around or try to escape or anything, okay? Do we have a deal?
Mr. Manager nodded. He put his face to the carpet and he closed his eyes. Quickly, Emily examined the office. She went through everything. There were only the 4 security cameras, all of which were aimed at the parking lot. Looking at various maps and documents, she got the lay of the land faster than you or I ever could have. With her photographic memory, she instantly understood the entire layout of the massive Skatopia complex. She also saw that according to the punch cards next to the old-timey clock, there were only 2 people working tonight, besides Mr. Manager. There was the poor geek currently residing in the dumpster, and the girl she had just seen, whose name was Sydney. Emily readied another zip tie for Sydney and left the office. Rounding the corner, she saw exactly what she expected to see based on the maps. There was a rock-climbing wall off to her left, which was right next to the entrance to the indoor go-kart track. On her right was an arcade with the classics, like air hockey, skee-ball, whack-a-mole. Then there was the indoor batting cages, and then another arcade, this one the traditional video game kind. And directly ahead of her lay the heart of the complex, the roller rink. A laser-encrusted diamond mirror ball hung overhead, blasting rainbow beams all through the massive warehouse-sized room. All the while the music thumpa, thumpa, thumpa through the wall-mounted speakers. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. Except, of course, for the people. She had not been expecting all of these teenagers. But how could Emily have known that this was the night of the annual San Saskahanto High School Vipers non-denominational youth group lock-in?
Oh, figs.
Emily retreated. She needed to regroup, to rethink the logistics of this. I mean, come on, 14 teenagers plus one more employee? It was a lot of variables to account for. Normally, this would have been no problem at all for Emily. In fact, she was trying not to think about what it would be like to play dollies with so many pretty young people all at once. How fun. But no, not tonight. This was Ben's night. She'd made a promise, a pinky promise, and that mattered. So she needed a little time to strategize. She took Ben to the supply room, where she challenged him to eat as much candy as he could. Ben said he wanted corn dogs. She said okay, but he had to wait.
No corn dogs till you finish your candy.
With Ben suitably distracted, she went back out to spy on the kids of the roller rink. They were a motley crew of milk-fed farm kids just hitting the peak of adolescence. The amount of fierce sweat and self-doubt was palpable. She wrinkled her nose at the fog of pheromones and teen angst. In just a few brief minutes, she had sufficiently scouted and studied her prey. She knew who they all were and what roles they played in their social structure. Sydney, the employee, cut the music and told the non-denominational youth group that there was pizza and soda waiting for them in the party room next to the bowling alley. The kids chucked off their skates, leaving them scattered across the rink, and ran towards the party room on stockinged feet. Except for one of them. The cool girl lingered behind, the pretty girl with the heavy makeup, the only one with a cell phone. She stood under the lasered mirror ball, taking pictures of herself in one pose and the next. The last picture had a blur from a zip tie dropping down around her neck before cinching tight. Where she woke up was not where she fell down. Now she was on the indoor go-kart track, behind the wheel, wrists and thighs zip-tied to the steel frame, and something thick wrapped around her throat. The little go-kart engine was at full throttle, but it wasn't moving.
Hi, are you awake yet? I don't have a lot of time, so I'll make this quick. You're the popular girl. All the boys like you. I saw it. And with all the makeup you're wearing, I think you see it too. I'm not going to kill you. You have so much to live for. But if you want to keep living, you have to keep your foot on the brake pedal there. You see that? Your foot is already on it. Don't move it. Oh my, whatever you do, don't move it. I zip-tied the gas pedal down, so if you lift your foot even a teensy tiny bit, you're going to speed ahead. But that's a problem because of the chain around your neck. You feel that, right? If you move even an inch, it's going to choke you to death. So you need to sit here, not move a muscle, and if you can do that long enough, everything will be okay. Got it? Okay, I gotta go. Bye!
Emily had played all the angles in her head, and this felt like the quickest and easiest way to contain the situation. But if it was going to work, she needed an ear. It would have been much easier and more expedient to slice one of the ears off of this pretty girl, but instead, Emily just took her earring. And then she walked all the way back to the dumpster and cut the ear off the dead kid. She did this because she felt it was more in the spirit of what Ben wanted tonight. Since the dead kid also had an earring, it was easy enough to switch it out with the pretty girl's. At which point, Emily walked all the way back to the party room next to the bowling lanes, where the non-denominational youth group was chowing down on pizza and drinking orange soda from paper cups. The entire room went silent. They looked at this creepy girl walking through their midst and climbing to stand on the table. Although Emily was well groomed, her pretty hair in braids and laced with fresh flowers, she was also disheveled. She was too thin and quite dirty from so much travel. She looked down on them and she smiled.
I have neither the zip ties nor the patience to tie up all of you, and I promise not to kill you, no matter what my instincts tell me. So I have this.
She tossed the ear onto the table, right next to the pizza.
That is your friend's ear, the pretty one. She is still alive, but if any of you attempt to leave this room, she won't be.
One of the older boys reached up and tried to grab her, tried to pull her down off the table, but Emily was too quick. She dropped a plastic loop around his throat and zipped it tight. The boy squealed. He retched. He clawed at his neck, and then he collapsed.
Is there anyone else?
When he was on the floor, motionless, Emily dropped down next to him and used her knife to cut the tie. The crowd parted for her, and she pointed at each of them with the tip of her knife, counting them in turn.
You're missing two. Where are they?
She pointed her knife at Sydney, the waitress. They went to go do laser tag. It's on the other side of the bowling lanes. Emily knew where laser tag was. And she knew that she could seal that room off from the entire rest of the building just by zip-tying the doors together. Just like she did with this party room when she left. Between the sealed doors and the fear of death, she thought that would be enough to keep the teens contained. She quickly walked past the darkened bowling lanes towards the laser tag arena in the back corner of the building. It would have been faster to skip, but for once Emily didn't feel like skipping. This was all turning into far too much work. The laser arena doors were closed already. She was planning on just sealing them up with a zip tie and letting that be that. But then she saw the trail of spilled candy. Sour Skittles, Ben's favorite, were spilled all over the carpet leading up to the door. A high-pitched scream came from inside. It seemed that the game was already afoot. Then she heard something else, a cry for help. And she took off running, leaving Ben to have his fun unsupervised. Mr. Manager had more chutzpah than Emily thought. As she had disabled the phones in the office, he managed to get the door open and then inchworm crawl out around the corner to the food bar area. There was an extension phone there, which he could use to call 911. But the phone was too high up and he was too low down. By the time he raised a clatter trying to reach it and dial the number, Emily was upon him. Zip-tying his ankles hadn't got the job done. So she took it up a notch. She used her knife to notch a little hole through the back of each of his legs at the bottom of the calf, just in front of the Achilles tendon. A through-and-through puncture. The cuts were surgical, but that didn't mean it hurt any less when she threaded another zip tie through the holes and cinched his two tendons together. He passed out from the pain. When his eyes opened, he was upside down, suspended in the air with a plastic ball from the ball pit jammed into his mouth. He was dangling by his tortured ankles from the safety harness attached to the rock climbing wall. His full weight hung from his bloodied tendons. Emily stood under him, looking up smugly. He wailed.
Well, maybe you should have thought of that before breaking the rules. This is all your fault, Mr. Manager, and now you're being a crybaby. You know how hard it was to drag you over here, get you hanging like this. I'd have preferred to slit your throat and make you do the wiggle worm dance. But no, not today. Today I can't do that. So I'm doing this. It makes you feel worse, and that makes me feel better. Now, I have to go check on laser tag before these idiots upset my Penji boy.
The two young men, who were both freshmen in high school, had been playing head-to-head laser tag. They had 3 kills apiece, and it all come down to the 7th and final showdown: sudden death. They noticed the smell before they knew anyone else had joined them in the dark, twisted labyrinth of black lights and LED strips. One of them asked, "Does it smell like a zoo in here?" The other one didn't respond. He seized the advantage, moving in on his friend, but then stopped short when the masked behemoth emerged from the darkness in front of them. One of them screamed. The other one shit himself. On instinct, they both raised their laser guns and shot, hitting Ben in the face with red dots, which he swatted at, temporarily distracted. The two boys ran deeper into the arena, and Ben bounded after them. He was having a really great time. He laughed at these boys and tried to tag them the old-fashioned way. Emily made her way into the laser tag arena and wound her way to the very back. She knew the layout perfectly and found the two boys huddled together in the corner, weeping as Ben towered over them, still the champion of tag. He said he wanted to try bowling next. Em thought of a way they could make it more fun. There were a total of 8 bowling lanes, but in 2 of them the pins had been cleared out and replaced by a bound teenage boy. They were facing forward, looking up the lanes, past the arrows, towards the little girl and the giant. Ben palmed an 18-pound ball in one hand like it was nothing. He only had 3 fingers on that hand, but they were all too big for the holes. Emily had a 10-pound ball, bright and sparkly pink. She had turned on the swirling colored lights that were usually reserved only for the midnight space bowling jam, and she'd found some Spice Girls songs to play over the loudspeakers. Emily went first. Her aim was a little off, and the ball glanced off the trembling hostage's shoulder. Ben looked down his lane, squinting behind his mask. And then he took a big step to the right and let loose, throwing the ball overhand. It hit the pins like cannon fire and sent them sprawling out in every direction. Emily went again. This time her aim was spot on. Because the ball was so light and she was so small, the kid was lucky that he only got a broken nose, cheekbone, and orbital bone.
Your turn, Benji. Let him have it. Yes, you're right. It probably will kill him. Probably, definitely, absolutely.
Dead. Promise.
Fine. You tell me what we do next then.
And he did. They went to the arcade, but Ben's mighty boots smashed the Dance Dance Revolution sensors, so they went to the old-timey arcade, where Ben proved to be quite adept at both skee-ball and whack-a-mole. They took their tickets to the prize counter, where Emily decided it would be okay to take whatever prizes they wanted. Emily got a stuffed unicorn, and Ben got a big, bushy, fake mustache that he stuck to the outside of his mask. There weren't roller skates big enough to fit Ben, but he insisted that Emily find some that she liked. Then he held her hand and walked her around the roller rink as the music played and the rainbow light beams sparkled all around them. They went around and around, and the music never stopped. Finally, she got tired of skating, so they went to the food bar. Emily fired up the deep fryer and made corn dogs for Ben and potato wedges for herself. Mr. Manager was still howling. As Emily found the ketchup and mustard, Ben wandered over to the rock climbing wall. He stood face to face with the blubbering man. And he got in close, so close, eye to eye. And then he said, "Boo!" Mr. Manager shrieked and pulled away. Ben went into a fit of giggles and then gave the guy a gentle push to set him swinging back and forth. Emily watched on. She sighed contentedly. It was so nice to see Ben having a good time. He deserved it. They feasted on fried food drenched in condiments. Ben ate 16 corn dogs, and then took some of Emily's potato wedges, that scoundrel. After that, they tried mini golf, but the sticks were too small and Ben didn't like it. So Emily came up with a different idea.
How about another game of tag? Only this one is different. Let's call it Dolly Tag. No, we aren't going to kill them. How many times do I have to say it? It's not about killing, it's about something else. I got the idea from that boy in laser tag. Let's see how bad we can scare them. If they pee themselves, we get 1 point. If they throw up, 1 point. And if they poop their pants, 2 points. No, you don't get 2 points from earlier. We weren't playing yet. Well, I don't care if it's your day. That doesn't mean you can cheat. Okay, all the outside doors are locked. It's a lock-in, remember? We can let those kids out of the party room and give them a head start, and then go after them. Yes, if they have any pizza left, you better believe we can eat it.
What followed was the best game of tag that ever was. Emily used her words, her knowledge of psychology, and the threat of her blade to instill fear and panic in the victims, while Ben just used his Ben-ness, and he was easily ahead on points after 30 minutes. Then there came a bit of a dispute when Ben accused Emily of cheating because she was about to cut the eye out of a young woman.
But I wasn't going to kill her, duh. Lots of people just have one eye. It's not even a big deal.
Otherwise, it was great. It was better than great. It was perfect. For Ben and Emily, anyway. Ben won the game. Emily was gracious in defeat. And they found the ice cream cooler before heading for the door.
Oh wait, one last thing. Come with me, Benji. Let's get something so we never forget this night. Say cheese!
Emily sat down in a photo booth. Ben had to crouch down to duck his head and part of one shoulder inside, but he got in next to her. They got 2 strips of 4 pictures, one for each of them. They held hands and left Skatopia behind them, disappearing back into the woods. Ben walked, Emily skipped.
Well, Ben, I have to admit, I'm impressed. You did, the best job picking the adventure. Sure, you can do it again. I'm not your boss, silly. I'm your friend.
Ben stopped. He tensed up. He sensed something. He stepped in front of Emily to protect her. There was a man in the woods, waiting for them. A dark figure stepped into the waning moonlight. Ben, Emily, I'm not here to take you anywhere. You're not in trouble, I promise. I just want to talk. Emily knew better.
I've seen you. You're with the DRO. Special Agent Bill Handel.
No tricks, Emily. I promise. I don't want to lock you and Ben up again. I just want to talk. Ben took a mighty step forward. A red dot appeared on his left eye, and he started to swat at it. 2 more dots appeared, dancing across his head from different angles.
That's what you say, but that's all the DRO does. Experiment on people.
That's true. But this is about another experiment. One that you and I were both in. One I just recently learned about. Emily, your dad, Kurt Mason, he was my brother. I'm your Uncle Bill. Thanks for listening to another episode of A Scary Home Companion. If you have not heard all of Ben and Emily's previous adventures, check out the episodes Slasher Spectacular, Night of the Long Knives, Squatchman, Emily the Hero, and The Dollhouse, in that order. Find the show on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, or email us directly at ascaryhomecompanion@gmail.com. Or you could cut to the chase. Support the Patreon page. There you will find 5 full-length exclusive episodes, and 1 more on the way, along with shorts, background material, stories, a timeline of events, insightful analysis videos, and a character directory. The episode was edited and produced by Jeff Davidson and featured the incomparable Savannah Hensley as Emily Mason. Music by The Fucked Up Beat, Apparatus of Control, Benjamin Banger with Church, Yacht with Holy Roller, Chad Crouch with Skip Street, The Devil Music Ensemble with Family Returns, and Chelsea Oxendine with the theme music. Ben ate 16 corn dogs, and then took some of Potato's Emily wedges.